Stop. Before you close this video, go look at your cinnamon jar. The one in your kitchen right now. I'll wait. That thing you've been putting in your oatmeal, your tea, your baking for years? There's an 80% chance it has never been real cinnamon. Not even once. And the wildest part? The people selling it, they know. They've always known. This is the story of how the spice industry pulled off one of the longest-running food deceptions in history, why your doctor might actually care about this more than you do, and what that innocent little jar is really hiding. Here's where the story starts getting strange. Cinnamon is not one plant. It never was. It's actually a name that got borrowed, stretched, and eventually hijacked, applied to two completely different trees that happen to taste similar. And that single naming mistake, or maybe it wasn't a mistake at all, has been causing confusion for over 500 years. In the 15th and 16th centuries, European spice traders were literally going to war over cinnamon. Portugal sent warships to Sri Lanka specifically to control the cinnamon trade. They built forts. They killed people. Real cinnamon, Ceylon cinnamon, was so valuable it was literally traded like gold. Kings paid fortunes for it. And now the real version sits mostly ignored on specialty shelves while the cheap knockoff fills every supermarket in the world. That's how completely the tables have turned. So here's the actual science of it, in plain English. Real cinnamon is called Ceylon cinnamon. Cinnamomum verum, verum literally means true in Latin. It comes from Sri Lanka, which used to be called Ceylon, hence the name. The bark of this tree is thin, papery, almost delicate. Harvesters peel it by hand in thin strips, and those strips naturally curl into tight rolls with multiple layers, like a little scroll of paper. The flavor is subtle, lightly sweet, almost floral. Refined. You'd recognize it immediately if you tasted it side by side with what you're used to. The other one is called Cassia. It grows in China, Vietnam, Indonesia. The bark is thick, hard, a single chunky layer with a hollow core. It looks and feels like actual pieces of tree bark, because essentially that's what it is. The flavor is bold, strong, almost aggressively spiced, the sharp hit you get from most store-bought cinnamon products. Cassia grows faster. It's harvested easier. It costs a fraction of what Ceylon costs. And in the United States, perfectly legally, it can be sold on a label that just says, cinnamon. No explanation required. Okay, now here's where I want you to actually pay attention, because this part isn't just interesting, it's genuinely useful information that most people have never heard. The difference between these two cinnamons isn't just flavor. One of them contains a compound that, in regular large doses, can silently damage your liver. And most people eating it have absolutely no idea. Cassia cinnamon contains coumarin, a naturally occurring chemical that in high doses is toxic to the liver and kidneys. This isn't a conspiracy theory. The European Food Safety Authority has an official, tolerable daily intake limit for coumarin. Germany actually issued a formal public health warning about Cassia cinnamon overconsumption. Some German Christmas cookies were found to have coumarin levels so high that the government told people to stop eating them in large amounts. Christmas cookies. That's how real this is. Ceylon cinnamon has almost zero coumarin. Essentially undetectable trace amounts. It's the version that researchers actually use in studies when they talk about cinnamon's health benefits, blood sugar regulation, anti-inflammatory properties, all of it. But when influencers and health blogs say, add cinnamon to your diet, they rarely specify which one. And 8 out of 10 times, the one sitting in your kitchen is the one with the problem compound. Genuine question, did anyone already know there were 2 types of cinnamon before this video? Drop a yes or no in the comments. I'm actually curious what percentage of people watching this already knew. But here's the thing, Cassia versus Ceylon is actually just the first layer of this. Because there's a second, darker problem underneath. Some of what's being sold as cinnamon isn't even Cassia. It's not even a spice at all. Spice adulteration is one of the most underinvestigated food crimes in the world. Multiple independent lab studies have found cinnamon products, particularly cheap, unbranded ones, contaminated with starch fillers, sawdust, and in some tested markets, substances used purely to bulk up weight and deepen the color. One study by the American Spice Trade Association found alarming levels of contamination across multiple spice categories. And a separate investigation found lead compounds in spices sold in certain markets, not trace amounts, but genuinely concerning levels. Here's the thing that gets me: you'd never know. The powder looks the same. It smells roughly the same. It sits in the same type of jar, on the same shelf, at a slightly lower price. And unless you have access to a food testing lab, you are essentially trusting the label. Which, as we've already established, the label is not exactly your most honest friend here. Real quick, if this is already blowing your mind, you're going to want to subscribe before you forget, because I cover this kind of thing regularly. Food industry deceptions, health myths, stuff that affects your everyday life but never makes the news. Hit subscribe and come back. Now let's keep going, because the how to actually protect yourself part is coming up right now. Here's something most people don't realize: you don't need a lab to catch most of this. There are a few simple things you can check at home, right now, that will tell you a lot about what's actually in your jar. Look at the sticks, not the powder. This is the easiest giveaway. Real Ceylon cinnamon sticks have multiple thin, papery layers all rolled together tightly, delicate, almost like a rolled-up newspaper. You can crumble it with your fingers. Cassia sticks are thick, hard, single-layer bark with a hollow center. If your cinnamon sticks could double as a small piece of timber, that's Cassia. Check the color. Ceylon is lighter, more of a warm tan, yellowish-brown. Cassia is darker, richer, often reddish-brown. The deep, vivid cinnamon color that most people associate with the spice? That's Cassia's signature look. And this is actually fascinating from a psychology standpoint. The darker, bolder color of Cassia is part of why it won the market. Our brains associate deeper, richer color with stronger flavor and better quality. So the cheaper product literally looks more premium on the shelf. The spice industry didn't just get lucky here. This is consumer psychology being used against you in a grocery aisle. Read the label, specifically. Look for Ceylon cinnamon, Cinnamomum verum, or product of Sri Lanka. If it just says cinnamon with no further detail, assume Cassia. In Europe, some packaging does specify. In the US, it almost never does. The iodine test. This one sounds like a science class, but it actually works. Take a tiny pinch of your cinnamon powder, mix it in a few drops of water, and add 1 drop of iodine solution, the kind you can get at any pharmacy. If the mixture turns dark blue or black, there is starch filler mixed into your cinnamon. Real, pure cinnamon turns a very faint reddish brown. The darker the reaction, the more filler is in it. Try it. The results can be genuinely shocking. And here's a bonus test almost nobody talks about: the float test. Drop a small piece of cinnamon bark or a pinch of rolled stick into a glass of cold water. Real Ceylon cinnamon, because its layers are so thin and papery, will start to slightly unravel and soften within a minute or two. Cassia bark barely reacts, it just sits there, hard, because it's a dense single layer of wood. It's not a perfect lab test, but it's another layer of information you can get with literally just a glass of water in your kitchen. The more you combine these tests, color, texture, iodine, float, the clearer the picture gets. And the picture is almost always the same: most people have never actually had real cinnamon in their home. And now the question that I think everyone gets to eventually when they learn about this stuff: if we know all of this, if scientists have documented it, if health authorities have issued warnings, why is it still happening? Why hasn't anyone fixed this? The answer is uncomfortable. But it's important. In the United States, the FDA allows Cassia to be labeled and sold simply as cinnamon. There is no legal requirement to specify which type. No asterisk. No explanation. This is not an oversight, it's a classification that has been in place for decades, during which time the spice industry has grown into a $20+ billion global market where cost-cutting is the primary competitive strategy. Here's something that makes this even more infuriating when you understand it: the major spice companies are not buying from farmers and then mislabeling. They are buying exactly what they ask for. The purchase orders say Cassia. The import documents say Cassia. Everyone in the supply chain knows exactly what it is. The deception doesn't happen in some back alley, it happens in the marketing department, when they decide what to print on the front of the jar. Cinnamon. Clean. Simple. Technically compliant. And deliberately vague. And here's the darkest curiosity about this whole thing: the health research on cinnamon. the studies you've seen shared on health blogs, the cinnamon lowers blood sugar headlines, the add cinnamon to your diet advice from nutritionists, most of that research was done using Ceylon cinnamon. But the product that lands in people's homes based on that advice is almost always Cassia. So the marketing benefits from research done on the good version, while the bad version gets sold. That's not a coincidence. That's a structural gap that the industry has quietly benefited from for a very long time. I'm not going to tell you to throw out your cinnamon and panic. That's not the point. If you use a small sprinkle of cinnamon occasionally, you're genuinely fine. The coumarin concern is primarily for people who use large amounts regularly, cinnamon supplements, daily high-dose additions to food, that kind of thing. If you use cinnamon more than a few times a week, or you're using it specifically for health reasons, switch to Ceylon. It's widely available. You can find it at South Asian grocery stores, health food shops, or just search Ceylon cinnamon online. It costs more, sometimes significantly more, but you'll use less of it because the flavor is more concentrated and refined. A little goes a long way. For everything else, just buy from a reputable brand. Check the origin on the label. If there's no origin listed, that alone tells you something. And maybe try the iodine test once, just to know what's actually in your kitchen. Knowledge is the whole point here. One more thing on Ceylon that nobody mentions: storage. Because Ceylon's bark layers are thinner and more porous, it oxidizes faster than Cassia. Meaning if you buy Ceylon and store it in a clear jar near your stove, which is how most people store spice, you will lose its flavor and potency within weeks. Store it in a dark, airtight container away from heat. A small sealed tin or an opaque jar in a cabinet. That's the difference between Ceylon that tastes incredible for 18 months and Ceylon that tastes like nothing after 6. The spice is worth more, treat it like it's worth more. Because here's the real takeaway from this entire story: the spice industry isn't doing anything technically illegal. They're working within the rules. But the rules were written by people who weren't particularly motivated to protect you. And in that gap between legal and honest, that's where this deception lives. Quietly. In your spice rack. For years. After everything you just learned, are you going to switch to Ceylon, or are you in the "I'll keep using what I have" camp? No judgment either way. Tell me in the comments. And if you already use Ceylon cinnamon, where do you buy it? Drop a recommendation for everyone else watching. The thing about cinnamon is, it's not alone. Turmeric is being diluted with lead-laced dyes. Saffron is one of the most counterfeited foods on the planet. Vanilla extract is mostly synthetic vanillin with no actual vanilla in it. Your spice rack is basically a highlight reel of the food industry's most creative cost-cutting. And I want to give you one number before I go, because I think it puts all of this in perspective. The global spice adulteration market, meaning the money made specifically from selling fake or diluted spices, is estimated to cost consumers over $50 billion every single year. $50 billion. That's not a rounding error. That's an industry inside an industry, built entirely on the assumption that you won't check, won't test, and won't know the difference. The next video is going to show you exactly how deep this goes with turmeric, and that one involves some of the most well-known brands in the world. You do not want to miss it. Subscribe so you catch it when it drops. Share this video with someone who cooks, they'll actually thank you for it. And remember, the most powerful thing you can bring into a grocery store is just knowing what to look for. See you in the next one.